The Institute of Directors 2020 Singapore Global Convention brought directors and leaders of the corporate world under one roof to deliberate on the theme, the board's risk resilience strategies.
Can I once again welcome you to the 2020 Singapore Global Convention. In its third edition, this convention has evolved into quite a significant event in the busy calendar of Indian and Singapore economic engagement in this area. The earlier events served as a very useful forum for interaction between Indian corporate leaders and with their Singapore counterparts and counterparts across the ASEAN region. It's proved to be a unique platform to discuss current economic trends and deliberate on strategies to address key challenges facing corporate boards globally.
With Asian economies having to face the challenges now and being poised to lead the next phase of global growth, Singapore happens to be an ideal place in Asia for IoT to host this conference on risk management. It is essential now, more than ever, that our businesses all over the world focus on strategic planning, policies, ethics and governance, which will ensure sustainability. I congratulate the Institute of Directors on getting such a high prolific group of experts and directors under one roof, and such relevant discussions will be very meaningful. These deliberations will surely throw up many fresh ideas and perspectives, develop market-driven strategies and solutions to achieve a very harmonious convergence on ethical and transparent boardroom leadership, and provide policy inputs to our governments here and in the region to ensure corporate sustainability.
If you look at manufacturing in India, it's got, it's got an imagery of being high risk. It had about 20,000 people. Again, a lot of employees, the risk factor goes up, managing a lot of employees in India. The business had an EBITDA margin of about, single-digit percentage, about 6-7% at that point in time. Again, quite vulnerable to any fluctuations in the business volumes, again, high risk. So it had risk written all over it, and when one looks at it from a board perspective, from a shareholder perspective, or from any perspective, one needs to step in and say, how do we mitigate this risk, and how do we turn this around?
We've always had the good fortune of having a very, very strong board with independent directors, and they have been not necessarily appointed by the government. They have been chosen very carefully. We have a mix of people who come from foreign banks. We've always had that. And over the last 10 years, I think we've always had somebody who's an eminent person in the IT space, who's just given over or taken. Of course, then the other mix, like having a set of people who understand finance, chartered accountants, and so on. And what we increasingly find is that the engagement of the independent directors in the discussions that happen in the board, not just on credit proposals and things like, what should be our strategy for the year and so on and so forth, but how strong we are in making our bank a more risk resilient, the topic of today's discussion, risk resilient to face the challenges of the future.
As far as risk is concerned, the risk is like friction. You cannot remove it completely. You can't mitigate it totally. Something will remain and you will have to manage it later on. The risk is, with the complexity in the world, the risk is becoming more and more difficult and more different, whether it is geopolitical risk, whether so many areas of risk, starting from Brexit and US-China trade war and whatever areas you wish to take. And then you come to the climate change and you have volcanoes going in Philippines yesterday. You have jungle fires going still in Australia, and they're still to completely do it. So much is really happening. These are all risks which one has to take into account. The business people have to take into account to see how we are going to manage and cater for it.
I would like to say, if I may, that the theme for this event is exceptionally well chosen by the IOD. The concept of leadership and the risk management are utterly crucial to all our future, and they will define whether our economic systems can survive and thrive through to the end of the century. More than that, it isn't an exaggeration to say that the future of life on our planet also rests on these issues. Because whether we like it or not, we live in a world that it is built on risk. It is a world facing potentially catastrophic climate change. It is a world with endless disruptive technological advances, and it is a world of increasing inequality between nations and peoples, with all the social turmoil and international tensions that brings. It is why so much depends on finding and fostering the wise leaders, the men and the women with the ability and the willingness to seek long-term answers to long-term problems.
Institute of Directors was honored to welcome His Excellency Javed Ashraf, High Commissioner of India to Singapore, to deliver the inaugural address to directors.
It's a great pleasure to be back for the third edition of the Singapore Convention of the Institute of Directors from India. It's just been 3 years, but in the course of these 3 years, this has evolved into a major and certainly a significant event in the rather busy calendar of India-Singapore economic interaction, and particularly so in a city that is really a regional and a global hub. It is very important that this convention is being held in Singapore for a number of reasons. One, of course, is that for India, this is a region of great priority as encapsulated in our Act East policy, and business in economic ties are a critical component of our strategy and of our policy.
Lieutenant General J.S. Ahluwalia presented the convention souvenir to His Excellency Javed Ashraf.
I think the India Institute of Directors is definitely a very unique pan-India organization that has all the corporate leaders, and I think it is serving a very, very useful function, and I think I'm very impressed that IOD is now globalizing. In particular, I'm very appreciative that IOD has come to Singapore, and my research center at the university is very, very privileged to be able to, sign the collaboration, the memorandum of understanding with the IOD.
I was here to present a keynote on a new model of risk management and internal audit. What I spoke about is fusing these two using absolutely latest exponential technologies like blockchain, artificial intelligence, machine learning, analytics, and feeding it into the process so that the model can keep evolving and keep getting better.
I was very glad that I have a chance to present risk governance on the topics of risk appetite statements, risk capacity, to see how modern risk management can guide company, build risk culture, and help the resilience of companies. I've been very impressed by the forward-looking nature of this conference. For example, diversity was a very hot subject brought up in many panels and speeches.
Well, today we talked about the role of the board in terms of risk governance, and I think it's a very relevant topic today as many companies around the world are definitely facing a lot of risk issues in terms of their strategy, their business, and their operations, and I think this is definitely something that the Institute of Directors is very focused on, and I think it's the right topics that we should be discussing.
We've been looking at kind of three broad but interrelated questions. One is, how should people make judgments? How should they assess risk and uncertainty, which is more about normative models, traditional models from statistics, probability theory, from machine learning, from AI. And then we've been looking at another question, which is, how do people actually make judgments about risk and uncertainty, which draws in cognitive psychology, sociology. And our main mission has been to kind of combine the best wisdom from all approaches.
I'm very glad to note that IOD has decided and gone global and international over the last 3 years. And coming out to locations like Singapore or to London, where they also do a program, is very enriching, because just as India gets to globalize, Indian companies get to globalize, I think the directors also need to have that global exposure, and these kind of platforms bring the best of the world for them to experience.
Risk management always has been a very key element of our strategy, and all throughout my career I've firmly believed that if your organization is sensitive to risk and people across level understand what risk management is all about and translate into action and become the first line of defense in their respective areas, I think it's a huge competitive advantage you gain over others.
Today we heard about businesses which have lasted generations. There was a business in Japan that just lasted 1,300 years. How do you pass the story through 46 generations? That's the challenge of leadership today. And one of the things I shared as well is some of the challenges facing leadership in this world of exponential technologies like artificial intelligence, for example. Everything now can be done by a machine. So what's left for human beings? The only thing left between machine and human beings is our ability to tell stories.
The complexity of risk management has gone up, and it is likely to further go up in the future. What we can manage is the internal risk, which is known. Anything happening anywhere will impact your business, because you may be anywhere globally. However, in whichever business you are, those businesses are global in nature, and any event happening in any geography will impact you. So you have to be vigilant 24/7 to manage your business.
I have been introduced to IOD for some time, and I have chosen to become a lifelong fellow of the Institute of Directors India. I think it is doing a great job pulling the policymakers, the boards and the executives together to make sure we can define what boards must do to be to lead future successful organizations. And I love to be part of IOD.
The Central Bank of Sri Lanka declared 2020 as the year for promoting digital infrastructure in Sri Lanka. So they've adopted several policies to strengthen the regulatory framework. And these measures will help Sri Lanka to ensure the safety of customer funds and enhance efficiency of the payment and settlement systems of the country. So implementing a fintech regulatory sandbox in order to provide a safe space in a controlled environment for innovators to test their products and services without the risk of infringing on regulatory requirements is one of these ideas. So these are new ideas for Sri Lanka, really. But we've done very well in the IT space overseas. And we are also right next to India, which is going to become a $5 trillion economy. So apart from our free trade agreement with India, we also have a free trade agreement with Pakistan, and recently in 2018 signed a free trade agreement with Singapore.
International trade, of course, is when a company in one country builds something and exports it to consumers in another country. There are different impediments to international trade. Some are what are called natural, and they simply occur because it's difficult to do transactions over space. Some of them are of course, man-made, and they're called artificial, and I'll talk about them later. But many of the more profound barriers to the growth of international trade, which has propelled countries like Singapore and India to dramatic growth over the last 40 or 50 years, they're coming to an end, or have already come to an end. So let me just go through 3 natural reasons why the growth of international trade is coming to an end and is slowing profoundly. So first, there's a slowing growth of tradables. Most international trade is in goods, not services. And productivity growth in goods has simply slowed dramatically in the last decade, and that's likely to persist in the future. It's simply getting more and more difficult to produce goods more and more cheaply. As the growth in goods manufacturing, those productivity gains taper off, international trade in goods is going to fall. And that's been taking place for a number of years, but most dramatically in the last decade, it's likely to continue. Here's the second one. As economies mature and get rich, demand shifts away from goods towards services. And in a place like Singapore, most people aren't involved in the production of goods, they're involved in the production of services. Like myself, as a dean of a business school, I produce a service. Anyone who works in education or in healthcare or in most financial services, those services are simply not tradable. As countries get richer, demand moves away from tradable goods towards non-tradable services. And again, that's likely to continue.
IOD President Lieutenant General J.S. Ahluwalia felicitated Peter Ong Boon Kui, Chairman Enterprise Singapore, with the Institute of Directors Distinguished Fellowship.
As the Chairman of Enterprise Singapore, it is my honor to join the list of business and government leaders who have received this award. Like Andrew, I also have rather negative prognosis about the world. In fact, I didn't collaborate with him, but my speech goes this way, which is that our gathering tonight takes place at a time of great uncertainty. Globally, we are faced with trade tensions, Brexit-related uncertainties, geopolitical tensions in the Middle East, and more. More than ever, businesses need to navigate the terrain nimbly and prepare for eventualities that are hitherto inconceivable. In such an environment, it is even more important for boards of companies and organizations to work with their management to provide guidance and highlight areas of risk and opportunities.
If I could invite Mr. Tamanika and Professor Rose to come to the stage for the final part of the proceedings this evening, which is going to be the facilitation of the Golden Peacock Institutional Awards. First Golden Peacock Award for Corporate Ethics this year goes to Consumer Appliances, Blue Star Limited from Mumbai. The third sector for risk management is the financial sector, MBFC, and the winner of this is IIFL Finance Limited from Mumbai. The eighth winning sector for risk management is the oil production sector, and the winner of that is the Oil and Natural Gas Corporation from New Delhi. The third sector in this award is the government sector, and the winner of that is the Society of Integrated Coastal Management from the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change for the Government of India. In the petrochemical sector, we have Reliance Industries Limited from Mumbai. We now have two Golden Peacock special commendations. The first of these is in the award for corporate ethics, and the winner of this is Muthoot Capital Services Limited from Kochi. And finally, can I ask the President of the IOD to very kindly present an IOD memento to our distinguished guest, Professor Rose. Delegates invited by the Institute of Directors networked at the INSEED campus.
That boasts of two top universities in EU, and we referred with that.
Companies enriched audiences with the presentation of case studies on the Institute of Directors Convention theme, the board's risk resilience strategies.
all those activities are affected. After that, I moved to power sector.
You asked me the difference, separate that this risk is separate and the strategy has to be same. Both has to go on the
C-suite executives, like
So that's really the
crux of each activity job. Groups will do it to the job and all the process we will use building the business cover. Drop it.
As far as the risk management is concerned, it is core of the topic for the board, which I am chairing, and it is very, very important, as far as the product and performance of the company is concerned, and that is how, keeping this in view, we have chosen to make a presentation in IOD. As far as IOD is concerned, they have been making a great contribution in making the awareness, known to the people about strategy, risk management and corporate governance.
Today we could see a lot of eminent speakers are there. All are very expert in their own fields, and this forum, Institute of Directors, is bringing them all together, giving a forum for having very creative and constructive discussions, deliberations on various issues globally as well as particularly to our country also.
It's been a fantastic platform for Indian boards to come here and get the best of global expertise and actually helping Indian boards to start working with global expertise so that they can be brought back to our country.
These issues are so important. They're existential issues. They're about the future success of organisations, countries, and in fact the global economy. There is nobody in the room who doesn't realise that these are important issues, and to bring a forum together where we can grapple with these issues, learn from each other, hear about new breakthroughs such as the work that we're doing, and help people find better ways to cope with these really large issues and ultimately to improve their performance. So congratulations, IOD.
Very happy to be here. I was a keynote speaker earlier, particularly speaking on the topic on stewardship, which is the key to responsible wealth creation. And particularly privileged and happy to be interacting with a group that is full of people who are practitioners, who are directors on the board as well as owners of business.